Wow, let's give it up for Kevin Thompson. All right. You can stay standing up because it's going to be very short, as you know. I'm always... Okay, God bless you. You all look beautiful today. Not just today, but you all look beautiful. And when I see you, I feel you look beautiful. Thank you, Risford. I wasn't fishing, but I take it. All right. Yeah, Hannah, you're absolutely adorable. Thank you for emceeing today. Let's give Hannah a round of applause. Thank you. And give it up for our praise and worship. Aren't they amazing? I'm not wearing these glasses because I can't see. I just figure it makes me look smarter. Is that okay? All right. Protecting God's sovereignty. Get your pens and paper. Like Dr. Silva's already at it. In my last sermon on the Higher Ground pilgrimage in Korea, we talked about fighting for God's sovereignty. Was anybody there? A couple of you are there. Today I want to talk about protecting it. God's sovereignty. So what is God's sovereignty? So I would say that the essence of God's sovereignty is God's freedom to dwell, to work, to love, and to express himself through his children without obstruction. Does that sit? Relationships, especially between key people in the providence, become a foundation for God to gain ground. It's remarkable that even God, in all God's mighty power, has no foundation without human beings. It's remarkable. So today, I want to talk about how that ground gets lost. Often by friendly fire. So history is full of people who love God, who serve God and fought for God, and still ended up working against God. I think we have to be careful too. It's not because they wanted to become evil or because they stopped believing, but because somewhere along the way they surrendered ground that belonged to God. Somewhere along the way they made a choice to sacrifice God's sovereign foundation. So what's happening? What is this? It's actually betrayal. So let me ask you, have you ever been disappointed by someone? Have you ever been disappointed by someone you love? I'm not talking about an enemy. We heard a lot. We received a lot of education about loving our enemy. But I'm talking about someone you expected more from, a friend, a family member, a leader, or a brother or sister, maybe even yourself. Some of the deepest wounds come from people who should know better. That is betrayal. Betrayal isn't something that your enemy does to you. Betrayal doesn't come from your enemy, it comes from someone who should be your friend. And that raises a question. How can good people who love you betray you? Or more importantly, how can good people who love God betray God or work against God? The truth is, human beings are capable of betraying truth while believing that they are protecting it. Do you think the Pharisees woke up one morning and decided, let's go and oppose God's Son? That's not how they saw it. Of course not. They believed that they were protecting something sacred. Or do you think Judas thought he was serving evil? Or had he perhaps convinced himself that he was helping? Again and again throughout history, people have surrendered God's sovereignty while believing that they were doing the right thing. Human beings are frighteningly capable of betraying truth while believing that they are actually protecting it. Human beings, we, are frighteningly capable of betraying the truth while literally believing we are defending it. And why? I think it's because we believe we have something to lose. The betrayer pulls heaven's purpose downward. The betrayed is given the opportunity to lift it higher, but both can fail. When you have a conflict in the realm of the providence, there can be strong arguments on both sides. So how do you discern what's true? At the time of Jesus going the way of the cross, most people thought the decision was the right one. How do you discern what's true? What happened in that instance was the betrayers were seeking to undermine Jesus, while Jesus was seeking to create the environment for redemption. These two qualities show up every time there is a betrayal. Jesus didn't fail because he was able to hold the ground of God's sovereignty in his own heart. But actually, both sides can fail. I've been thinking a lot about this. In other words, the capacity to betray and the capacity to be consumed by betrayal live inside every human heart. The capacity to betray another, but also the capacity to be consumed by the betrayal of another, exists in each one of our hearts. First, let's take a look at how a good person can betray. Why do they compromise God's sovereignty even while thinking they are doing the right thing? Why? I think one of the biggest causes is fear. Fear makes us surrender ground that belongs to heaven. We will trade heaven's sovereignty, heaven's ground, out of our own fear of losing something else. We'll trade it. People betray truth when they believe they have something to lose, either position or reputation or security or influence or their version of the truth. So when fear of loss becomes stronger than our connection to God, we surrender ground that belongs to heaven. Let me put it another way. When fear of loss becomes stronger than our vertical connection to God, we will surrender horizontal ground that belongs to heaven. Follow? When we fear, and when that fear of loss is even stronger than our love for God, we will sacrifice God's sovereignty to protect that which we're afraid of losing, even while believing we're doing the right thing. Be careful. Fear becomes stronger than faith. Self-protection becomes stronger than responsibility. And image becomes more important than truth. Who loses is God. God loses ground in the heart of that person and then in the relationship. God loses ground. Guys, temples are destroyed because of this. Institutions collapse because of this. Families can break down because of this. But truly speaking, none of us can determine the outcome of those things. We can only determine the outcome of our own heart and our own action. So what does that mean for you, and what on earth can we do about it? Let's look from the perspective of the person who is betrayed. The betrayer loses ground for God in their own heart. That's significant. Because the minute the betrayer, let's say, when we betray, we step out of that. We put our fear central, not our love for God central. We put it just to the side. And that obstructs God's ability to work through me, to feel through me, to love through me. Right there, we're already damaging God's ground in my own heart, in our own heart. Then that person can damage the relationship through acts of betrayal that further deteriorates the foundation for God to work. It obstructs the ability for God to work in that relationship. The final front line is where, though? The final front line is in the heart of the one who is betrayed. It is how that person responds that will ultimately determine the course of history. Jesus was betrayed, but he gave up everything in exchange for our salvation. True Father was betrayed many times, but he already knew by age 15 that you cannot hold on to that. He already knew what happens if you allow betrayal to consume you. He knew well. And now, True Mother, she is betrayed by the very people she has raised and loved. So we may think that these people, these special people, have some kind of magical power that allows them to feel numb in the face of betrayal. We may think that these special people don't feel the same hurt. God feels the hurt. They feel the hurt just like we do. I believe they feel the hurt more because when they are betrayed, they know the ground that is being lost. We're kind of ignorant about it. We know how hard it is for us to overcome the disappointment, and everything that comes with it if we are hurt. But we shouldn't be thinking that it's easier for them because they're more spiritual. I think it's harder for them because their first instinct is the pain they know it creates for God. And then the pain it creates for humanity, because they know that when God's ground is lost, humanity's joy, happiness, and fulfillment is delayed. Their own personal feeling may be the very last thing that occurs to them. But we shouldn't be confused. Jesus, Father, Mother, these kind of great people. These are supreme masters of that battleground, that final front line. They're not numb to it. They are supreme masters of that final battleground on the front line of their own heart. So what actually happens to us when we are betrayed? Betrayal actually tries to make us smaller, I believe. The final danger of betrayal is not what collapses around us. It's what it does inside of us. Think of Mother's situation. Reverend Thompson mentioned collapsing situations in Japan. It's like a meteorite shower of problems hitting Korea. And the worldwide movement in terms of every member's heart who's concerned for Mother, praying for Mother, wondering what on earth is going to happen. How on earth did we get here? And who did what and why? You know, if you've participated in my Higher Ground Tour Q&A, I see it happening at 3 levels. It happens in the realm of the individual heart. It happens in the realm of the institution, our organization, and it happens at the state level. All of these 3 levels, depending on how healthy each of these 3 factors are, these are the things. These factors determine how much attack and how much betrayal by her own people, by her own organization, by her own leaders, by her own offspring even, can be allowed to frustrate. That final battleground. We just heard this beautiful song. It's about this point, what Mother said before going into detention. How would we imagine Mother digests? The final danger of betrayal is not what collapses around us. Actually, it's what it does to us on the inside. The greatest danger is allowing fear, disappointment, or human pettiness to take away the ground that belongs to God in your own heart. Because that is all you have left to control. We don't want to lose the buildings. We don't want to lose the institution. Dang nabbit, we're trying to go the other way. We're trying to create a peaceful nation. But the nation seems at war, the institution crumbling, and like Reverend Thompson said, what we have that is most precious is our faith. Actually, even deeper, is your identity of who you are. So I'm giving you this message as a protective layer around everything that's happened, and even surely more to come. You know, when I'm deeply disappointed by someone, this is my experience. If I'm deeply disappointed by someone, especially from someone who I have great hope, it takes me to a place of total shock and awe, surprise. Actually, even just to discover how far human beings are capable of going. How far we're willing to go to preserve our self-interests. How important are those self-interests? But in that place, in that moment, I felt this throughout my life, and it's not because I too am not a betrayer, but I'm talking now about the perspective of being disappointed by another. In that place, I feel something happening to me, inside of me. I'm tempted to become cynical. I can hear myself rehearsing the reasons why that person is wrong. And in fact, they're wrong. So I'm now going down the list, rehearsing the reasons why they're wrong. But through it all, something's happening to me, Dr. Salover. I notice myself becoming smaller. And I realize that the real danger is not what's happening outside of me, but within. What's happening within. Betrayal tries to change us. And perhaps the deepest question is this. When betrayal exposes the pettiness of people we hoped were larger, how do we keep our own heart from becoming smaller? I'll repeat it. When betrayal exposes the pettiness of people we hoped were larger, how do we keep our own heart from becoming smaller? That's the real battle. You know, some of the battles are big and glamorous, and you can make PowerPoints about them. You can give reports about them. They're external. But the greater battle is protecting the condition of our own heart. I can tell you about everything going on in Korea as far as I know, what's going on in Japan as far as I know. But why? Why am I on tour talking about those things? Can you do anything about what's going on? Actually, you might be able to do something. But in reality, can we really do things about, what is it you can do about what's going on in Japan? You can do something. But what you can do in that external fight is minuscule in relationship or by comparison to what we can do in our own hearts here. Because it really is about what happens there in your heart. The greater battle is about protecting the condition of our own heart, because it is about what happens in that place, right there, that will have the biggest impact on what happens externally. And by the way, it is the only thing that we have full control over. Not you? How do we do it, though? How do we remain pure-hearted in an impure world? How do we stay connected to heaven when institutions and relationships and human beings disappoint us? How do we continue loving, leading, correcting, protecting, and serving without becoming emotionally possessed by the battle itself? It doesn't mean we cannot be angry, by the way. Jesus was very angry, but he took responsibility. The betrayals did hurt him, for the reasons I explained earlier. But betrayal never gained ownership over him. Why? Because there was nothing he was unwilling to lose if it meant remaining aligned with heaven. There was absolutely nothing he was personally unwilling to lose if it would allow for even a small foothold of God's sovereignty to remain intact. There was a pathway for Jesus to not have to lose his life, to not have to lose the opportunity of having a family to achieve that victory. But I tell you, the capability for him to go to the cross and offer his life for the salvation of humanity was in him prior to all of the betrayals. The capacity for that person to go to the ends of the earth for you was in him growing all along. Don't wait until you're taken to the cross before you check yourself. Is there anything you're unwilling to lose? Because that is our Achilles heel. True Mother is showing us something very similar. Because there is nothing she is unwilling to lose if it means remaining aligned with heaven. By the way, it's literally true. I happen to know that there were many efforts made, Lena, for Mother to make her own personal journey far easier. All she had to do was exchange just a little piece of God's sovereign territory. By the way, territory that was gained with blood and sweat and tears and human sacrifice over the long course of human history, and True Parents Foundation and her entire life's foundation. She might argue, well, some of it belongs to me, surely. I can just exchange a little bit of it and then get back to touring the world and meeting my children. Wouldn't there be a reason to justify such a thing? How many years left does she have? She might think, well, for the sake of thousands of years of human history, it is more important for me to be able to see the light of day and speak with my family members in Las Vegas even one more time. It would be worth giving just a centimeter of God's sovereignty in exchange for that. Shouldn't she be able to say that the sovereignty that she could claim by showing up and meeting with you even one more time is greater than that centimeter she would give up? She has shown me, and I have the details to prove it, but she has shown me that even that 1 centimeter of God's providence, of God's salvation, of God's sovereignty is more precious even than her own life. That's the standard. By God, we have to be careful. It is remarkable how far human beings are willing to go, to quibble, to justify, to distort the truth behind the veil of speaking on behalf of it. The truth. It's remarkable what human beings are capable of. So that's why we should really look to Jesus, to True Parents. It's not just something that they can do because they're special, Reverend Thompson, right? They want us to be able to understand these deeper realms. So what is our responsibility? There is a difference between accountability and resentment. There is a difference between mercy and enabling. There is a difference between forgiveness and enabling. There is a difference between grace and enabling, covering everything up and making it okay when it's not. Jesus was very clear. As much as the ears could receive it, he would educate them on what was out of alignment. Think of Father. Father has described in great detail every single critical mistake of others throughout human history that shaped the course of the providence. Not so that we can put people down, but so that we can learn from the mistakes that we make. So, accountability and resentment are two different things. Mercy without truth becomes enabling, and truth without mercy becomes cruelty. The mature path, brothers and sisters, is holding the space for both. So here's a question. What remains when position, recognition, and mission, and organizational belonging, and approval, and human understanding are stripped away When those things are stripped away, what remains? Can I become the kind of person who remains rooted in God no matter what is happening around me? The likelihood is I will fail. Can I become the kind of person who remains rooted in God no matter what is happening around me? Because every act of fear, ego, self-protection, gossip, resentment, ambition, cynicism, mistrust, all of this strips away what? I might be able to protect some of my territory, but at what cost to God? At what cost to God? So the real question becomes, what's the opposite of that? It's every act of faith, responsibility, truth, humility, courage, discernment, forgiveness, and love can restore that ground. So my question now is, what condition can I make today that gives God more room to work? Even if I'm in great pain. That's the higher ground approach. That's the higher ground approach. The higher ground is not the system. It's not the position. It's not the recognition. It's not the power. The higher ground is the place in your heart where God's sovereignty remains intact because you have protected it there. The higher ground is the place in your own heart where God's sovereignty still remains intact. What am I afraid to lose? That is a really important question. What am I afraid to lose? Because what I'm afraid to lose, I might be willing to sacrifice God's sovereignty to protect. What am I afraid to lose? Because that is the place where fear can become stronger than faith. That is the place where self-protection can become stronger than responsibility. That is the place where image can become stronger than truth. That is the place where God's sovereignty is still limited. The goal is not to lose everything. The goal is to know what never must be lost. Most of us are afraid of losing the wrong things. Of course, we don't want to lose organizations, buildings. We don't want to lose our home. We don't want to lose our family. We don't want to lose our own dignity, our position, our job, our income. We don't want to lose all these things. But the standard was set with Jesus. Because in the very beginning, the first family was willing to lose all of what God had given for what little they thought was necessary. And the reverse course has been the course of human history. And even though we are not living anymore in an era of indemnity, according to True Mother, indemnity is still an option if we choose to frustrate God's heart. The capacity to betray, which is ultimately about betraying God, and the capacity to be consumed by the indignant feelings of being betrayed, both of these two seeds exist in all of our hearts. The goal is not to lose everything. The goal is to know what never must be lost. And if you know that, then everything else becomes secondary. I believe what gave Jesus strength, what gave True Father strength, and what gives True Mother strength today to say the words that inspired that song come from that place, that they are equally, each of them, totally aware of what must not be lost, and each of them totally willing to lose everything of their own in order to protect that thing. This is the standard of heart. This is the standard of dignity. This is the standard of integrity that God is hoping we can grow in our own minds and hearts. That's the standard, guys. It's not just the standard for messianic type people, because we too have the capacity to destroy God's work. So we also, that means, have the capacity, Shingi, to create incredible, limitless foundations for God's victory. God's sovereignty is not lost when someone betrays you. God's sovereignty is lost when betrayal gains ownership of your heart. God's sovereignty is not lost when someone betrays you. God's ultimate, final, frontline battleground that he's hoping you can be a master general son and daughter, to not be afraid. God will be there for you. God will be there for us. God's sovereignty is lost when betrayal gains ownership over our heart. So no matter what happens in Japan, no matter what happens in Korea, no matter what happens in America or anywhere else, the absolute strength of our collective offering resides in the individual hearts in each one of us, and the depth that we can go to protect the sovereignty and expand the sovereignty there, that we stop allowing the mistakes of others to diminish us, because that makes it harder for God to work through us. And of course, we've preached a lot about forgiveness. But let us understand the stakes. Brothers and sisters, we have the power to protect God's sovereignty. And I think that that's kind of what Mother was saying when she gave those final words. Don't worry about me. Don't pray for me. Worry about yourselves. I've got me. If you think you can help me get to where I am in your heart, that will be the greatest thing we can do, not only for the sake of shifting the spirit world that seeks to tear us apart, but actually to create the most golden, beautiful Chonoguk legacy for decades, centuries, millennium to come. You are the chosen people, Mother said. And that is our chosen mission. So God bless you and thank you.